Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Aaron Beaumont. Aaron is a Brooklyn-based producer, composer, and mix engineer who creates music for wide-ranging spaces, from the Tribeca Film Festival to Theater 80 in the East Village, to West Hollywood Carnival Main Stage, to KCRW Santa Monica. There's no way I'm going to pronounce this right, to the Sziget Festival in Budapest.
That's right.
I've actually been to Budapest. Sziget. I've been to Budapest, but I don't remember how to pronounce Hungarian. I never knew how. Since 2016, Aaron has served as in-house producer, composer, and mix engineer for the Gregory Brothers / Shmoyoho Accent on the Yo, with original songs collecting over 1 billion streams, dozens of iTunes chart toppers, and a gold record. Friend of the podcast, Carl Bonner, put us in touch, and Aaron graciously agreed to join us on the air. So with all this to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Aaron.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me, Ben.
Yeah, it's a total pleasure. We've been schmoozing a while already for a while because we have a lot in common. I'm from Brooklyn. He lives in Brooklyn. I'm a fan of the Gregory Brothers for a very long time. Anyways, thanks for joining me. I'd love to hear a little bit about your story. You know, how this whole thing got started for you. What's your origin story, so to speak?
Yeah, my origin story is, it's a long and winding road, I guess. I started out. My mom was a piano teacher and a grade school teacher involved in music, 4th grade fine arts. So I grew up listening to her play classical piano, and that's all I wanted to do through high school. And then in college, started playing in bands and all that stuff. But I didn't start really writing till I took some jazz piano lessons just to kind of get a little more fluent harmonically. And that started me writing. So I wrote an album that a little label in LA put out, and I wound up moving to LA, and kind of, my origin story was very much writer, composer, arranger, occasional keys player on a project if I was working as a writer or whatever. And not a lot of, I was recording in studios, but not a lot of, I didn't come up in the studio system, assisting, and, not a lot of, just reps with knobs and faders and all that stuff. I was around it, but
You're coming from more a classical jazz background, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely more, playing, writing, composing, and lyrics also to some degree, but definitely more writing cool. Type background. So it wasn't till, I wrote a musical that went up just in the Fringe Festival here in New York, and my now fiance and I decided to just stay. So I was kind of here without my, my crew of collaborators, people that I wrote and played with, and all the other, I had a band in LA, 7-piece with horns, and it was just this throwback soul funk thing that was super fun.
Nice.
So I moved here, and I kind of was just left to my own devices, literally my laptop. And so I started making music that way. And, fast forward 2 more years or so, and I started working for the Gregorys as their producer. So yeah, it was during that time, just really intensive, learning the tools of the trade, and I guess just really trying to make as much as I could. And then certainly, starting to work with the Gregorys was just hitting hyperspace, whatever the Star Wars terminology is, it was just hyperspeed. There you go, warp speed, or whatever.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah. I think warp speed
9.
was Star Trek.
I'm conflating,
guys. I'm not a nerd enough to know this.
I've just embarrassed myself. Sorry.
Yeah, we're both embarrassed. It's all good.
Where they would pull out their wands and say a spell, and then all of a sudden. No, I'm just...
is that Harry Potter or something?
Yeah. I'm just trying to throw everything in the pot right now.
Just do it.
You shall not pass. Sorry. So I, starting to work for them, obviously it's just the pace at which, I think we've averaged probably at least a track a week for 6-7 years or something. It's just it was an opportunity to intensively make hundreds of things very, very quickly.
Yeah. Pop in those
so
reps.
Obviously, just in terms of chops, and they have a lot of production expertise and editing, and obviously vocal technique and whatever in terms of doing what they do.
Right? Didn't I thought they did it all themselves? I was surprised they had somebody in house. Actually,
They always did. I think they did, and they kind of worked with a few people, here and there prior. And then when I started working with them, I think they shifted to focusing more on like the writing, the video production, and they're obviously also involved in producing tracks. The way it works is we're all just at the studio in different rooms, and one of them will throw me a sketch of something he's working on, and then I'll kind of like do a bunch of sound design, and it's just like it's a lot of back and forth and a lot of it's a really moving target until they hit like upload. It's a strange process because at the last like 5% of the mix, I could get a whole new vocal, or we could like completely rearrange the song, or like add a bridge, or there's like,
wow, that's gotta be stressful.
I mean, it can be. It's like it's a little bit of a wild ride. I wouldn't say the temperature is never like anxious in there. It's always like it's fun. I mean, I will say, right. It's like it always feels fun. It always feels like there's a good perspective on like, okay, what are we here? What are we here for? What are we doing? And I think they put a lot of emphasis on just I mean, I think the process of making something is the reward. So if you're not like having fun while you're doing it, why are you doing it? It's like you never know what the outcome of anything is going to be. It's like, and that's certainly been true in my experience with them, where it's like, wow, this is such a banger, and then it might get like a couple 100,000, or just might not be something that people latch onto, and then it's always like the ones that we kick out in a rush, and you're just like afterthought. Like there's this one. So my birthday is in the end of June. And without fail, there's something culturally like viral that happens right in there. For some reason, like the last couple of years, there's always been one thing. And so like, I wind up working for a couple hours on my birthday or around my birthday weekend, just doing something really quick. And multiple times that quick little thing has turned into, like
the big one of the year.
Yeah, like the Trump ramp song, or Chrissy Wake Up, or like all those were on my birthday, where I was just like, oh my goodness, I just got to do this real quick. And then like, that's the one that like 10 million people
that pops
see
off.
Or whatever. Yeah. So, I mean, point being, you never know what will happen with something. It's like, that's not, I think, and truly for me, I think the process, the making of something itself is the end goal. Like that is the, I mean, that's what I want to do every day, the rest of my life. So it's like, my life the outcomes could not change at all. And I would be like, totally,
Yeah. I think there's something maybe about working on stuff for YouTube versus, let's say, like a record, or like, I mean, I know you do records also, but like, like, oh, this is going to be like set in stone. This is the record. And, maybe it'll get submitted to the Grammys, and like, we're going to get it properly mastered, and all the perfectionism that happens with like a record, and like, versus like, oh, we're just going to pop this on YouTube because it's hilarious, and let's just bang it out. I feel like there's like a lot less pressure in some sense to like overdo it. And yet at the same time, you're probably doing so many reps that make you so much better at this, you know what I mean? Faster, getting it in,
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's definitely like, it was like a boot camp type experience when I started there, because I was certainly more of the, coming at it from the former perspective, where, we would spend a lot of time and labor and love in a song, one song, one recording, one arrangement, or whatever. And I think that, I think there's value. It's a balance. I think that it's not that the, like with the Gregorys, they're definitely like very intentional and very meticulous and very like, about getting every little click out and getting every, like doing as much as we can possibly do right up to the finish line of the window that we have, it's a very, just a very intentional, detail oriented process. But, I think that limitations are very useful. I think they're essential for any kind of creativity, like certainly now in the age of, this is one reason why I'm interested in kind of like reverting back to more hardware, more gear, more of a sense of like this box is the generative mechanism for my song. Like I'm going to make it on this thing with these knobs and these faders, and I'm not going to like, go digging through 700 plugins or 50 VST synths or whatever. It's like you could tweak endlessly in the digital computer music making era and never finish something. So I mean, like ask the guy who has 700 plugins if he gets to the finish line sooner than the one that has 10 or whatever. I mean, and I'm saying this to myself because I am the guy on Gearspace who's like, oh, look at this new thing and whatever. But it's like, I think
Sure.
I'm certainly coming back to a place of yeah, I mean, just not getting lost in the tools, and that the tools are far less important than the choices that you're making on whatever tools you have at hand.
It's the
tools.
It's the handyman woman's toolbox that it's like, okay, I know I have a hammer. There's a lot of different hammers that could do this job, but this is my hammer and I know it very well, and I know how hard I have to hit, or I mean, that's like maybe not the best analogy, but you know what I'm getting at.
Know how hard I need to hit this compressor with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I got that stock 1176 thing. Let's just do this.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so much value in, I mean, just in that idea of not only from a mixing and production perspective, but also like a writing standpoint of imposing a structure or imposing some rules on whatever you're working on to because I think that the boundaries of something are fruitful. Like the fact that I am writing this song on a piano. I'm going to make this on a piano, which is not a guitar, which I can only play with 10 fingers, and with, I'm glad I don't have like 40 fingers to play this piano, because that would make the decisions a lot more complicated or whatever,
Right.
I think
right.
The tools that you use themselves are limitations, but also inherently like opportunities. Like a rule is an opportunity to, make something according to that. Like I'm kind of quoting from some, I don't know if we want to like how deep we want to go on this, but there's this.
Go for it. I'm down.
There's this lecture that Brian Eno, it's like a lecture or an essay I remember coming across years ago, something along the lines of like gardening versus architecture in creativity and music making.
Okay.
as paradigms for generating new ideas. So like the one approach is a very executive, like top down, architectural, like I'm managing and controlling every last little detail, and like I'm spending 18 hours creating the perfect snare or whatever, like
yeah
it's one approach, one
or tweaking the snare
perspective.
till it sounds like it sounds in your head, kind of thing.
Yeah. And the other approach is a more kind of like top up, like I'm planting these little seeds. I'm gonna like see what happens. Basically, it's like a more discovery, exploration based approach. So like I'm
right. How many corn is actually going to grow here? We'll see. Could be 5, could be 10.
Yeah, it's like surrendering to a rule, which is like I think a really interesting kind of openness in terms of the. I think there's value in both of those. I think that there's like, just creatively speaking, you need both the kind of like control, structure, organization oriented, accounting brain, if you will, to sort of refine the raw materials of the, unedited, just sort of like purging, ideas side. Like I think you can lean too heavily one way or the other. And I feel like personally, it's way, way easier for me to start something new than it is to like look back at things that I started and finish it.
Yeah, same.
It's like, I think that the two are, there's a balance, a happy medium that you kind of need to seek to be effective, creatively.
I think it's really fun at the beginning of a production when you don't know where it's going to go and you kind of make a decision, like, let's roll with something. It's like, let's not like leave too many options open. Let's just like, we're inspired by piano. Let's go with the piano thing instead of a guitar thing. Let's, like, literally today I I beatboxed like a rhythm idea that I had into a microphone because it was like I just don't have time to pull up a plugin and figure out a way to program this. Let me just beatbox this in, and it was such a vibe. It's like, let's keep this in the song. You know what I mean? Like, and let's roll with that because that's interesting and that's different and that's unique. You know what I mean? And so like the beginning of a production is like such a time to plant. You know what I mean? Because it's like, because then it could go in any direction that you want, not that you want. It'll go in some direction based on just whatever's fueling creativity, and like you don't get stuck up in that kind of like, oh, but this isn't the kind of sound I wanted. Like, no. Like it's a ripe opportunity to do that kind of thing.
I mean, I think that one of the maybe the most important thing. This is a little bit of a hobby horse of mine, but just like momentum in the production process and just kind of like energy management. So like you're saying, just trying something, because like you'll never, I've never started making something and foreseen exactly what the outcome would be. It's like, that's what's beautiful about the creative process is that it's inherently, it is discovery. It's like, you're never really in control of what's happening. It's happenstance, a lot of it. But if you're open to that kind of like gardening type perspective, I think it's like, it can be really exciting and satisfying. And I think, I also just think as someone who overthinks often,
don't we all?
Like my best buddy, Nick, and production partner, co-writer, both of us are overanalyzers for sure. And like, so I think that if you're approaching a new production from that from that frame of mind, it can just be totally paralyzing because you could do anything. Like your options are endless now, basically from a production standpoint. So it's like, what then is the decision-making apparatus? What do you like? What do you want to do? So I think the answer to that is just something, just like do something. And then maybe that's not the right thing, but you can always do something else. I think that's always comforting to people, especially, I've worked with a few people recently where it's their first project. Maybe they've been performing and writing for a long time, but this is like their first release. And I think it's always comforting to know that like, you're never stuck with, you can always go back and, do something different. But like, wisdom doesn't come through, overthinking things in advance. It's like it's the old like wisdom through action. Like you just have to just try it and see what happens,
Yeah. I read a book called Start by this guy named John Acuff. I read it a while ago. I don't know if you've read it. It's like a self-help book, but it's like, if you don't start, like you literally aren't doing anything. Like you can't overthink all these things. You don't know what's going to happen. Like you're going to have to deal with whatever situation comes at you, but you're never going to know what those situations are going to be until you've just started. So you got to just put your first, your best foot forward and start. And then, and I feel like you said, like the beginning, like when people are working on their first thing, they're really intimidated because it matters so much to them and they've never done it before. And they don't realize that like, you're going to have to do a lot of these to do anything, So like, just get started and do a lot of these.
Totally. I mean, I think that it's like, everything you do in the creative realm is a practice. It's just a muscle that you're exercising. And I think the same thing applies to finishing and putting things out. And once again, I'm like talking to myself as someone who's like sitting on a pile of my own stuff. And I've just been like, wearing all the hats for all these other projects and not like putting my own stuff out. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just like, certainly for your first release, it feels like the entire universe is riding on this one song. And I think the reality is once that's out, you're like, oh, that was it. Like that wasn't, it's like going to the dentist or something where it's like, maybe it's this big like bogeyman in in your mind, and then it happens, and you get your teeth cleaned, and you're like, oh, okay. I was like, I'm a baby. I was, I was definitely being like, overly anxious.
Yeah, but you don't know better until you've been there and you've done it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, like just inertia is it's such an important idea, and that works both ways in the, in the creative or in any context. That like, which way is your energy? Where's your energy at today? I've heard this kind of ties into, I think that the end segment that you
let's not jump there
ask
yet.
is like, what are your techniques for, if you're not in the mood or whatever, but like just the, if your inertia is, feeling like inaction and feeling like a little bit of ennui or, like malaise, then, you need to do something to like shake the snow globe a little bit and like go for a jog or jump in a cold shower or whatever. It's like you can create some inertia that points you in the direction toward action, and then once you're in that zone, it's like just kind of like riding that wave. And I think, that applies to like regular releases, regular writing, anything that creative practices that you
right. There's value in
aspire to.
Yeah, the continuity and the habitual nature of things, and like yeah. Like releasing a podcast every week keeps me in that flow of I'm a podcaster. You know what I mean? If I skipped weeks, I would lose my. I mean, now I'm like at a stage where I think I'm starting to skip weeks because of just like family life. But like, if I skip weeks, then you lose that kind of like, the ebb and flow of your zone. But like, yeah, there's power in coming back to the same thing over and over again and getting into that routine and habit.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and once again, I have kind of fallen out of that a little bit in during the pandemic to some degree, where I previously was kind of, really regimented and getting up and like making some new thing every day. And, had this like set of practices that I have sort of fallen by the wayside to some degree. Yeah, exactly. And obsessing over it and constantly like tweaking it and whatever. And I think that there's some value definitely in just like, getting as many swings of the bat as you can. Obviously you don't want to like burn out. I think balance is always important, but, and being kind of like knowing when to be easy on yourself. But yeah, there again, that's just like energy management, and attention management, I think those are like my mantras for the last like year or two, is just like knowing what your internal state is and like how to optimize, like maybe, today isn't a day to write that lyric that I've been like, that's been looming over me. Like maybe today is a day to just like tune some vocals or to like,
right.
whatever.
Was it energy and attention management?
Yeah.
How do you manage your attention?
I mean, well, recently I don't, but
I'm on Instagram, TikTok all day, every day. I'm not, but like, yeah.
I think I remember reading on the like self-help tip, a couple of years ago, I was like, I read a bunch of those, I don't even remember the titles now, but Deep Work was one that kind of stuck with me. I don't know if you,
I have it there, but I haven't read it yet.
Oh,
it's on my bookshelf. I haven't read it yet. It's on
that
my
was a really good
list.
one. And I think that is that Cal Newport? Is that the author? Yeah. I think his whole approach, and that's the only thing that I've read of his, but I've heard him on a couple other podcasts, and I think that like there's a lot of value now in the idea of just proactively trying to like, manage your attention in an era in which that has been made by default kind of like more and more difficult, so difficult. So making, one of the ideas in that book that I enjoyed was just like the idea that a state of distraction is like an exception to the norm. So like, sure, you can give yourself time to scroll or do something aimless on like Instagram or YouTube, or just kind of like scroll and click away. But like make that like, okay, this is my half an hour of just like
Right.
do whatever I want on my phone time and then coming back. So there's still like some sense of,
It's like
that's
structured, unfocused
built into
time.
you're like calendaring it or something.
Yeah, that's I have thought about that. Like there's like that 30 minutes after the kids go to bed, like maybe just like zone out for like 30 minutes and then like come back in, or maybe like at the beginning of my day or something. Although maybe that's not a good idea at the beginning of your day.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's tough because like if I've been the last like month or two trying to, I fell into this habit where I was like starting my day with scrolling, reading the news, checking my Instagram, checking my email, like first thing, before I even got out of bed.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like that does not, that kind of like dumps this layer of passivity or like reactiveness or something over the rest of my day where I can't, where I'm not being as like proactive or aggressive, or I don't know. It's just like a different energy level that it colors the day with for me. Yeah. So I've been trying to not do that. Not like, I've been like starting with, exercise and, cold showers actually. I've been on that. Yeah. I've been on that train.
I just spoke with Matt Boudreau, from Working Class Audio. This episode actually came out today.
Okay.
I love Working Class Audio. It's like OG podcast for me. And Matt was saying he's been taking like the last 30 seconds of his shower. He just like switches the faucet all the way to cold, and he just like just wakes him up better than coffee,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I should try that.
I mean, quite honestly, so I've done it almost every day. I was sick for like a day, a month or so ago. I was sick for a couple days. My like preface to this is I know that's been like all the rage, like everyone's talking about cold plunges and whatever. But my dad, when I was growing up, always did that, always did cold showers. And come to find out, like from my uncle, my grandpa also did that for whatever reason, like
it's a family tradition.
And so I remember hearing when I was little, like we always knew when dad was switching on the cold water because he would start like, making all, yeah. So, I mean, I guess I come by it honestly, but I've only ever dabbled with it until the last like it's been over 2 months now where I've done it literally every single day. And,
wow.
And it's a dramatic difference. I mean, it is just in terms of like your overall, it affects you like chemically, like it.
Yeah.
Your adrenaline and cortisol and dopamine and all those things.
Matt says that you're like 30% like less likely to get sick or something if you do that every day or something.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
According to some science thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm all about, I love, not to start like gassing up other podcasts, but Huberman Lab has been one that
I've heard of it, but I haven't listened to it.
It's a good one. He talks about all this stuff too, like cold exposure and, getting low angle sunlight, like at like first thing in the morning.
Sunrise, sunset thing.
Yeah.
There is something about being outdoors at that time for sure. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, well, and to like bring it back to creative practices, I'm kind of trying to put the horse back in front of the cart, I think, just like physically speaking, where I'm like trying to start with those, like, start by kind of like getting my perspective, my mind, my body in a good place to then, do whatever I need to do creatively that day, which, I mean, it's been great. Like, I've found myself like, this last weekend, for instance, all of a sudden I was like recording right through the weekend on like just a bunch of old songs that they've just been kind of like monkeys on my back, like, that have been laying around. And I'm always like, oh yeah, I should like, I got to put that out sometime. And, it's been 10 years or something and I have never touched them. And all of a sudden I'm like, getting some momentum in those.
That's cool.
Those other areas. So yeah, I don't know. I think that those kinds of practices can be for whatever you're trying to accomplish can be like really, really helpful. I mean, at least just based on my own personal experience.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that I don't keep the phone in my room. Like my phone has been out of the bedroom for years. Like maybe, but more than half a decade, like maybe 6 years even. I don't know. And like, sure, I check my phone sometimes first thing in the morning, but not usually actually, because I have a 4-year-old who and a 6-month-old who demand my attention a lot more than my phone does. So in that sense, like it's like, even if I'm like starting my day with like the phone scroll, it's like after I've dropped off kids at daycare, kind of thing. And like now I'm like,
I mean,
a second,
I've heard this from people. I don't have children myself, but like Nick and I have a lot of friends with kids, and they all kind of say the same thing. Like, I don't know how I ever got anything done before I had kids. It's like it just puts such a premium on your time, I think, when you have that, ultimate sort of like organizing force.
Yeah, it's it's exactly it, because you just like the time just becomes so much more precious all of a sudden, because like every single minute counts, like for life stuff also, sure, but also for like work stuff. It's like I have like 3 hours, let's do this,
Yeah.
And so that really puts a fire under your ass. There's no like that like leisurely hop in, get into the studio, hang out, let's listen to some stuff. Like that doesn't happen anymore. It's like, oh, it's go time, let's go. Which is good and bad. It's because it's nice sometimes to chill in the studio and listen to music and remember what it's about. But it's also like, okay, let's just go.
I mean, I think having that energy behind what you're doing is like, I would assume positive, because like, once again, like my experience with working with the Gregories, where it's just like all hands on deck,
Yeah.
I think that there's once again, to get back to like inertia or energy, there's like sort of a wave that you ride right up to the finish line. And then I think that there's, if you don't fall into that state of getting tweaky and just sort of like vacillating between like, oh, well, do I want this,
that's the worst.
do I want my ratio at 4-1, or do I want it at
That's why I don't
6 to 1, or
like that's why I could never be a mastering engineer for stuff that I mix. Like there's
that kind of nuance.
Yeah, because then you're still in the mixing brain, and you're like, well, but that changes the kick, and that change, like it's like, no, like listen to the full picture, and you know what, let somebody else do that.
Yeah,
that's like that mode of like, this compressor is doing something good, but it's also doing something bad. Like no, like stay away from that.
Yeah, that's a whole other level of just like, Jedi type audio that I still don't. I mean, I wind up. I mean, most of the stuff that I've done for the Gregories, for instance, I've also mastered, like with very few exceptions, like 5-10 songs or something. We'll send to our mutual buddy Dan Millis, who's amazing as a mastering engineer. Shout out, Dan.
Shout out.
I think he might have just. Well, I don't want to say that. He was at the Grammys last night. I don't know what the result is, but
guys, we're recording the day after the Grammys.
Yeah.
I didn't even see. I saw Nacho Molino, who's a guest on the show, won a Grammy, and probably a bunch of other people that I didn't see yet. So, well, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's always an exciting night.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I just getting back to my own history as a music maker. When I started working for the Gregories, it's like that's a definite like kind of everything changed moment, in the sense of I signed on to work with them kind of with there was a little ambiguity in my mind about like what exactly the role would be, more like arranging production type stuff. But then it wound up also being, like I guess I just assumed, well, these guys have someone else to mix and someone else to master or whatever. But more often than not, that's just not the case because of time constraints. Like something's happening, a video goes up that day or tomorrow or whatever, or
right.
Like during the elections, we're staying up watching the debates, and then staying up all night and making a song from like the vocals. Everyone's in Melodyne, everyone's tuning, throwing phrases back and forth. It's like,
yeah,
it's wild. But
oh my God, that Hairy Legs video is so good.
I like that one. That's a in-house favorite, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's a fun one.
I love when they like get up and they like green screen like like Biden's face over like them dancing or whatever. That stuff just always cracks me up. It's so stupid and silly, but it works. Anyways,
Totally.
as you were. I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh no, I mean I think that's one of the things that I've always enjoyed about working there. Like I mean, I've been there, what is it? 7 years, almost 7 years to the day. I think it was February 4. Anyway. Yeah, like you would think that I mean, I'm getting like the 7-year itch to do more work with them. Like it's always been enjoyable. Like it's always, they're whatever, in any job, there's stuff that you don't want to do or don't feel like doing, or it's stressful or whatever. But like, but just the overall environment is so like childlike, fun, just very kind of unflappable, like never, I don't know. It's just like positive. It's kind of like what I would say it's like what you see projected from their page. It's just like,
that's
super
so cool.
Good dudes, so positive. So like, I mean, I love those guys. So
that's so fun.
I'm on board as long as they want to keep sending me tracks to work on. But yeah, like also I just feel, indebted in the sense of having been able to get so much practice, and so many reps in. All of a sudden, I'm finding myself like I had obviously mixed and done a little mastering, before I started working with them. But like all of a sudden, I'm like,
mixing and
finishing
mastering.
Mixes, multiple. Just even that first year, they were doing another series on their second page called Happy Sad Songs, where we were doing. We were doing like our major to minor, where we were doing like taking a song and then,
flipping
the
flipping
it from major to minor. Yeah. And we did definitely one of those a week, plus whatever they were doing for, I mean, the first year it might have been like 100 something releases, plus all the other stuff that, they do for, I mean, what you see on their pages is, 50, 75% maybe of what they're actually doing. 'Cause there's always collabs with other YouTubers or with brands or whatever, so, so there's a lot of other.
You work also on their regular artist stuff. Like I know like Sarah has her own stuff and you're working on some of that stuff as well.
I've done a very little of that. They haven't done too much. I did a little bit, I think, on the Christmas album that they put out and a little bit on Andrew's solo album, but they haven't released a lot of solo projects, I think, during that time. I think some of that predates when I worked with them.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a fan of, they do their Christmas show here every year, which is like a big,
oh yeah.
It's a big, it's just a super fun night. They did it at Joe's Pub, I think, the last couple of years. And so anytime they do, non-songified music, like their own kind of original, they do a lot of their own original stuff. And I mean, they're all phenomenal musicians, like incredible players and singers, and they definitely know their stuff. So it's also just like a gratifying environment to work in, where it's just like kind of like just a bunch of music nerds and pop heads. Basically is what it is. Like,
super fun.
Just hook.
They've gotten you work and they've given you like tons of experience, and it's a dream job. That's so fun. I want to ask you a couple questions that my friend Justin, who introduced me to the Gregory Brothers in 2008, threw my way. His question is like, what role does comedy play in making a song in terms of like actual like sonics and engineering? Like, are you just trying to make things sound good, or do your engineering choices get swayed by humor? Like, what's like the balance there?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I mean, there are certainly ways in which the sound selection can kind of enhance the humor, whether it's, I mean, just choosing, I'm trying to think of a specific example right now, but even the genre, like thinking of some of the like happy, sad songs that we did, where we did, just juxtaposing, I remember we did Mad World, the Tears for Fears song, but in the style of Vanessa Carlton's 1,000 Miles or whatever. Anyway, so like there are concepts, like sonically or whatever, that that are just funny, can that just for whatever reason, it's really bizarre and it's funny and it works. But then also, I think the fact that it's not, you can use the seriousness of sounds or of a genre in particular that takes itself really seriously. Like, say, I'm thinking of when we did the Star Wars "I Don't Like Sand" song. I should look back. I need to look back through all my through my Gregory profile. But yeah, there's like some really cheesy lines in the Star Wars 1 through 3. The newer, like the 2000 era Star Wars.
Yeah.
And so we made like a ballad sort of like banger, kind of like Toronto influenced, like in the style of The Weeknd or whatever.
Okay.
That's like very serious, like smoldering, dark kind of trap sounds, but like Hayden Christensen singing about how he doesn't like sand, which is not, it's like if anything, it'll be an intuitive thing where it's just like, oh, well, this could be, or trial and error. But often it's not like something that you can put your finger on. It's like, oh, well, it's kind of like this, like his attitude, I guess if I'm thinking about it now, like with the Joe Biden stuff, there's something kind of like disco about Joe Biden where he's got the shades and he's just kind of like
they
finger gun
him so well. It's so great.
Yeah. And so like we've done a bunch of tracks that are kind of like that disco sort of vibe, because it's like, there's something inherent in I mean, I've never really tried to talk through it before, but there's something in the essence of whatever you're dealing with that might imply a genre or a particular sound or something that is just, it's just a funny fit, like juxtaposition for whatever reason.
Right.
We don't often spend a lot of time talking about like those generic kind of choices. Like usually if I get, say I get a sketch from them, often it's just Michael or Evan. They have like a pop, 80s pop template, or like just various, like a couple little templates with the same sounds that they've had for years that they'll sketch out, maybe like a lead or some piano part, and just like GarageBand or whatever Logic, like Devin, the drummer, or whatever the drummer is, trap drums, generic something or other.
Yeah, I got you.
So like I'll get something really kind of sonically generic, and then yeah, I mean, I guess just follow an impulse about like what the vibe could be, or what, more often than not, we're looking at what is, like what's hitting, what's on the charts right now, for particular sounds, because, by the time the song will come out the next day. So whatever's on the charts that week, it can sound like that. Like,
right.
Whereas if you're chasing those sounds in any other context, if I'm trying to like
for like a release in like half a year or something.
Yeah, with an artist, I'm like, yeah, it could be 3 years or whatever by the time this,
it comes out.
Like 2000, 2017, like super lo-fi type beat,
right,
comes out. So
in the middle of a pandemic, and then it's like, what?
Yeah, that's also a unique kind of like limitation, or generative mechanism or whatever, is like, well, we can literally just make something that sounds like some amalgamation of these 3 or 4 tracks on the, that are hitting right now, where it's never like, oh, well, we want that, like we want this to sound like this particular track, but where we have this kind of like cloud of sonic references, reference points.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you guys are like get a vibe of like, you guys will like listen to different songs, before you kind of decide all the sound choices, and you'll kind of go, we're gonna go with this direction, kind of like when you sit with an artist before you work on a song and you listen to music that they like, and
totally, yeah.
Yeah,
usually I'll see what's on the charts and like send them some stuff and be like, oh, this is a good, I kind of dig this vibe, or like, I feel like things are sort of like going in this direction. Like maybe we can do something like this or whatever,
Yeah. Amazing. Do you ever have to keep things in check? Are you like ever like the, the referee? It's like, okay, guys, it's been fun, but let's talk, what are we doing here? Like, what's our next move? Or is everybody kind of like on the same page and just like working towards a goal?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty, it's pretty like synergistic, I think, generally. I can't remember a time when, I mean, usually I'll have as many mixed notes or as many whatever as they will. We'll just kind of like, say we're finishing a version of something, listen through and be like, oh, I think these things should change or whatever. Like, I can't really remember a time when, we really differed in terms of like, oh no, this should definitely be that. And we went a different direction or whatever. Like sometimes that will happen where, maybe like, there are some eye rolls if we're, from me, I'm not going to put that on them, but like if we're dealing with a, commercial client or something like that, where we'll make something and then, we'll go through 5 different versions, very different versions of something, and then maybe come back to the very first thing that we made because, it's when you're taking all those other factors into account, considerations, like I don't know what, on the end user has for their criteria or whatever. I think often it turns into a too many cooks type situation or don't really know what they want kind of situation. But so occasionally maybe there'll be a little friction like from external sources or whatever. But like I don't remember. I think usually the we're all aware of like this is going to come out at 4 p.m. today. So,
right.
So like, there's not a lot of time to really fuss over things, which quite honestly has been a really liberating approach to music making. And, obviously not one that I can apply 100% to the other 50% of the work that I do that isn't Gregory Brothers related or whatever. But like, but just the idea of like which things are worth being precious about, like there are things that we will really try to get right. And then there are other things, it's like that don't need to be perfect or don't need to be, or like the finessey type moves that you're going to make, you'll hear on your monitors, but no one's going to hear that on their cell phone.
Like that 1 dB, piano, automation move in the second chorus,
Yeah. So, I mean, if anything, sometimes they'll try to rein me in on that front.
Right.
Like, where I'm trying to like get really detailed and layered and, like maybe do a little more heavy-handed production than is necessary,
Right. Because that's your hat. That's your wheelhouse.
Right. Right. But, ultimately, I think they're like proof that, the song is king and queen and the whole chord. It's like they could make a song that would work.
Yeah.
That would be tough to ruin with bad production because it's just like bulletproof.
Yeah.
Like the melody and the lyric, even if it's like silly, like it's kind of, I think it's just kind of like some savant, level pop hook writing happening.
Yeah.
there. Cause like I just,
Do you ever get involved in like the actual auto tuning process, or is that like do they still handle that?
I did quite a bit of that earlier on, where maybe I would do a verse, or occasionally I did a whole. There are a couple whole like hooks or a few videos that I, sort of drove the ship more when we were really trying to. When we had multiple things going the same week or whatever, it was like, okay, I'm doing this one, and they're doing kind of like the bigger ticket items or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's been less and less certainly during the election, everybody winds up tuning and writing and, putting together verses and stuff. But yeah, definitely the last like couple of years, I would say it's generally, I think Michael, does the lion's share of like
the auto tuning,
the actual tuning. They'll get together and write everything together, and then Michael and Evan will tune, and then we'll all edit stacks of BGVs. I mean, that's part of the magic of how they get it to work, because ultimately what they're doing is taking a vocal like the two of us talking and turning it into changing it from spoken to sung.
Yeah.
Which like, I mean, you would know this, but I think the average listener would not understand how labor intensive
I'm sure it's super labor intensive. And they also have like these like lyrics where they like the rhythm doesn't really make sense, but somehow they fit it into the song, like because of the way the person is speaking. Like even in the Korn song, there's like a lyric that doesn't really rhythmically make sense, but somehow it works. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like how do they do that?
Well, I mean, I think that's another, just to get back to the idea of like limitations, I think that limiting yourself to whatever, speaking as someone who I have written a lot of lyrics in the past, and, like some of the, I've done a lot of songwriting and like theater and things like that. Like staring at a blank page is like, it's intimidating. Like to start to like, okay, what do we want to say about life today?
Yeah.
About love, or about, it's like,
Yeah.
you kind of need something to limit the palette. So like
the fodder, so to speak.
yeah. Yeah. So like for them, the fact that I think it's kind of ingenious, they're using what people say as lyrics. It's like, you don't have to, that to me, that's the most laborious part of songwriting is getting a lyric right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're limiting something to like, okay, well, what did this newscaster say about this story? Then then you're using the words that exist and trying to find, okay, well, this rhyme could, this is a nice rhyme. That's like a nice couplet, and like their voice kind of drops down here. So maybe we feel like it should go up. So we want to like grab a vowel from somewhere else and like sub that in. And, it's like surgery. It's like word surgery.
Yeah. So cool.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know if I think they kind of like pioneered that. I'm not sure, but
I mean, I'd never seen it before them. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a technique that they have mastered, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's great because I've obviously I've been doing that myself. I did, especially the first few years, I did a lot of that. And so, so I feel like those, when I'm working on a vocal that someone sang originally,
yeah,
like actually sang, it's like taking off the leg weights. I'm like, oh goodness, this already sounds great. And like, I can,
just a little melodyne here, a little bit of that there, good to go.
I feel like I've gotten very, just good with vocals generally as a result of working with them.
That makes a lot of
like
sense.
Seeing how they produce the vocals. They're singing themselves and layering a lot of vocals in that you might not even hear, but just to kind of like support the...
No, I know. Yeah, they have like these gang vocals
vocal
underneath like
Yeah.
whichever politician or celebrity or, the Songify regular people videos and stuff.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. Amazing. Well, I want to ask you a little bit more about your story also. Before we started rolling tape, you told me that you're a big believer in New York, but you actually, saw the business in LA. What was that transition like from LA to New York? What do you see as like the biggest difference between those two spaces? And is New York still alive? Like, is there still stuff happening?
Oh goodness. I mean, New York is always alive. It's not like I didn't grow up here, but I've been here since 2014. So I'm coming up on 9 years. And I was in LA for about 6, I guess, before that. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of both places. Certainly, I'm originally from the Midwest, so moving to LA,
either city
was like a revelation. Like I think I landed there, in the middle of winter at some point, and I just couldn't get over it. But it always felt like a little exotic to me as a Midwesterner. So I think New York has felt more familiar, or more just, it instantly just felt
there's seasons,
right? Yeah. Well, and an Angelino would definitely push back on that and be like, oh, well, it rains in February or whatever. But like, I mean, so there are seasons there, but I think just the, I maybe it's just like this like masochistic Midwestern thing in me, but I actually think that there's value in how uncomfortable New York can be.
Yeah.
Like I think that there's something to be said for, it's just kind of like no bullshit. Like they're just, you can't coast here. You gotta be, I actually literally remember an MTA employee at some point when I was having problems with a ticket machine, like my first week in town or something, saying something like, you got to be in it to win it. Like, and he just said that a couple of times, and like it stuck with me. I'm like, oh, there's like an energy that you have, that there's like a certain,
totally.
I mean, it's aggressive in a way, but I think it's more like intention. I think that like, like you're not, everyone who's in New York, you're here on purpose. You're not here just because, whatever. Like I could be anywhere, but I guess I'm here. It's
Yeah.
like everyone seems like they're on a path or they're doing something, or I don't know. I think that has always really appealed to me. And then just creatively, I feel like there is and to be fair, I wasn't super tapped in if there was this kind of scene happening in LA, but just more more of an appetite for just like, let's just try something and who cares what happens to it afterward. It's like, it's not necessarily like, we're not going to try to sell this thing, or we're not going to, it's, I don't know if it's like a commercial versus like art type mentality. I don't think it's that simple, but I think, I do think there's like an openness to, exploring, just exploring like ideas here that I find exciting, where it's like, we'll have an idea for a program for this. I'm on the board for this like new music chamber, kind of like neo, like avant-garde classical series in town. And, if we have like, I was at a friend's show a couple weeks ago, and, I love the performance, and like, turns out that person is a friend of a couple other friends of mine. And, so we have an idea for this program. And then, the programs that we've booked have often come about like that, where it's just like, oh, well, what's the craziest combination of things we can come up with? And then everybody gets excited and gets on board, and it winds up happening. And then, it's been some of the most like gratifying musically experiences. We just did a program with another artist that I love in November, where we orchestrated a song cycle of his, a kind of like concept album. Aki Burmese is his name. Shout out Aki. Incredible artist and writer. And that just came from like a little seed of an idea. And then next thing there's a 12-person chamber, reeds and brass and strings and all this. And like, they're playing arrangements that you made. And I don't know. It's like, I feel like there's less of a distance maybe between like idea and execution. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, even if there's no like commercial value or whatever, so to speak.
I got
here.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I also don't want to put that on.
You know, like
I do love LA. I actually haven't been in a while now, but I loved it the whole time I was there. And I know that like industry wise, that's certainly like for pop,
right.
That's like the place to be for producers and whatever. But I think that there's all kinds of stuff happening in New York. And I feel like it's weird to say that New York is kind of like, has this a little bit of like little man syndrome about it or something. But like,
right.
because so much has gone to LA, and there's this mass exodus about when I moved here from LA, like everyone seemed to be going the other direction. And I think
right.
that's kind of like, that itself is almost like promising. Like I feel like ahead of the curve or something trend wise. Like I think
are gonna go back to New York.
Yeah, it's like, do the opposite of whatever anyone else is doing.
Right.
Like
that's people are leaving LA now, I think.
More interesting path.
Or like the bigger producers that already have reputations apparently are leaving LA because it's so expensive, and like, I don't have to be here. I could just mix from Montana or Vermont or whatever.
Yeah, of course.
But it's definitely interesting. It seems like also during the pandemic, I know like there was like a massive exodus from New York during the pandemic because the beginning was so bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a bunch of people left around then also. Like,
definitely. Yeah.
There was like a moment there when I was like interviewing people from New York, and within like a few months of me interviewing them for the podcast, they were like in LA,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was a scary, it was not, it felt like being in a war zone, for a couple of weeks there. It was just 24/7 sirens. It was an intense experience. And I was actually sick myself during that time. So it was like, there was a it was a rough year, 2020. But, I think the people who were here, or especially the people who stayed, like I think there was always this mentality of like, well, you know, New York always comes back. Like I
New
think
York
that's never left. And I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I see these like stories in the New York Post or something about like all this stuff about like crime on the subway and whatever. And obviously those are real problems, but I think that, you know, I think so much of that is like overblown, and it's just like in support of this narrative of like, oh, New York is dead, New York is gone. But like in my experiences, you know, it's as vibrant as ever. I mean, there's always so much happening.
Amazing.
I still, you know, I love it. So
awesome. Oh, I'm glad people still believe in New York, and it's still happening. So that's good to know.
So you were here, I mean, I don't know how long, like how often but you grew up here though. You said in
I mean, I born and raised in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I graduated from Queens College. So, you know, CUNY.
Yeah, cool.
So I was in New York. I moved to Israel at 22, and that was in 2009. And I've been here since then. So I go back to visit. Actually, we just went back in November for the first time since the pandemic. It was my first time back since that all happened. And it was different. It felt different, actually, New York. It felt like a little scuzzier than it was. Like, I don't know, for me, what was jarring was like going into like a pharmacy to buy shampoo, and it's all behind like a locked glass thing. And that was not the case last time I was in New York. So like I know crime has gone up and stuff, but yeah, I don't know. You know, I love New York. It's great. And
and that's also coming out of an era of like unprecedented, like, you know, it was like really, some would say like too nice for a while relative to the New York that like fostered the, you know, the Ramones and Blondie and Talking Heads and that whole scene, downtown scene, like in the 70s and 80s.
That was not the Brooklyn I grew up in. I tell people this, like, yeah, I don't even know what there's like a Yiddish word, Hamish. It means like homely. Like when I was growing up, Brooklyn was very homely. Like it was just like, you know, that like melting pot, tons of different ethnicities, and, you know, everybody was like low key. And then it became this like super gentrified fancy place after I left. Like really, as I left, like I left in 2009. It was like 2010 or so. It all started happening.
Yeah.
And like New York, every time I'd go back would be way more different than than when I had left. And so it totally swung hard in that direction. And so now it's kind of, maybe the pendulum is swinging again, and it'll find a balance at some point, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I
think good and bad, you know?
It probably had to adjust back, you know, maybe like overcorrected toward the, I mean, whatever. Obviously, it's a debate.
Right.
Depending on
There's
like
good things
whether
and
you're
bad
talking
things
to
about both
a
of those
landlord or a
things.
tenant.
Yeah. Well,
but
I don't know if New York will ever be affordable. That's a different question.
But like creatively and artistically speaking, I mean, I think it's as exciting as ever, if not maybe even more so, because I think there was like a little bit of a, you know, culling or something during the pandemic, and it's kind of like the people
that are still standing.
It's like the spoils. It's just there's so much happening. You know, there's
amazing.
It's an exciting. I think it's an exciting.
No, I feel that way here
time.
also. Like, yeah, I think those who somehow survived the pandemic are like able to just. There's so much work happening. There's so many people. Everyone wants to make music now. The pandemic did like this massive collective trauma, and now everybody wants to sing about it. So
yeah,
you know, we are here to facilitate that and help. And
thankfully
we're still here.
Right.
Right.
I mean, that's a real thing, you know.
Absolutely.
I think it definitely, like, you know, brought into or put a different focus on, you know, like just going back to perspective management. Like I think on what I mean, what you spend your hours on, your life on earth doing, and what you know, you just lent a little bit of, I mean, I guess perspective to what, you know, what's worth giving your time and attention to, and I mean, and also obviously it's really, I mean, I've always been super grateful to work in as a writer, as a music maker, as a maker generally, because I feel like it is, you know, it is like therapy. Like it's always, even if I'm going to the Gregory studio to work on some silly song or whatever, I don't like sand. It's like you always have the opportunity to express something, to process something, to, whatever it is you're making, it's like restorative in a way. I mean, I've kind of, maybe I've just
especially
been
with other
fortunate.
people.
Yeah. It's always like, sure. I mean, during, all the stuff that's happened the last like 5 years, just to be in a room with like a couple other people and you're just trying to figure out what to say about it and how to, express something. Like, I think that's why, that's why music exists, is because you can't, it's like where you run out of language, kind of,
Right.
You make music. So
That's that's why I like, that's why I don't focus on the lyrics as much as the aesthetic, because like, I feel like what I love about music is how, and this is also kind of why I'm not so into, songwriters that tell stories, because it's like, it's way too specific or on the nose. Like, I want something that conveys an emotion that I can also get behind, even if I didn't experience it the same way the artist did. You know what I mean? Like, whatever that emotion is that they're conveying, like, I feel it and I'm interpreting it for myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, lyrics are, it's just the hardest part of the equation for me. And I say that as someone who has enjoyed writing lyrics, and I think I've written some good lyrics, but, it's always like a painful birth, kind of. And I think that words with music, it's best case scenario outcome is it enhances what it amplifies what is happening in the music emotionally. More often than not, I think it just doesn't get in the way. It's serviceable.
Right.
And like, at worst, obviously, it takes you out of the music, and some of the songs that maybe you're referencing or whatever. I think it's so hard to write a lyric that doesn't take you out of that at least hits that threshold of like, okay, this doesn't distract me from what, like, it doesn't pull me out of what's happening.
Right.
And I mean, obviously the apex, the pinnacle of songwriting is writing a lyric that just so perfectly, enhances what's happening. It's like accurate. It's accuracy in a way, emotionally, or
who's
in
your
terms
favorite
of communication.
Who's your favorite songwriter?
Oh man, that's tough. I mean, I grew up listening to my parents' music for the most part. So all the 60s, 70s, like, Beatles, Beach Boys, Motown. I mean, I love all that, but also, weirdly, like, the only people in my family that ever bought movies for whatever reason were my mom and my sister. So I also listened to or like watched all those old, Rodgers and Hammerstein and like old music, like musical theater, Cole Porter and Johnny Mercer and Frank Lesser, all those like just iconic, Songcraft, Sondheim, people like that, where, it's really like craft. It's really, there's a lot of craft that goes into it. It leans maybe more heavily on the workmanship and less on the like mystery of it. Like, I do love a Radiohead, or I love,
That's mine. Yeah.
I love the kind of more like mysterious, mystical end of the spectrum too, where it's like, those words don't really make sense together, but like it weirdly kind of makes sense with the music. So,
right.
Like I do find arbitrary pleasure in just the aesthetics of like language,
Right.
And how something can land. But yeah, I mean, I one of the undergrad degrees I got was literature. So I do love, I love the poetic, even though that's, I mean, that's not like a lyric. A poem does not make a good lyric, but,
right.
But I do love like word craft,
Sick.
Yeah, I don't know. What about you? Do you write?
I have written.
Obviously, you produce and mix.
It's been a very long time. I'm like, right now I'm fully focused on helping other people with their music. So
yeah,
I'm like not at all in my own. But I did an album like 9 years ago of like original songs. I think some of the songs actually stand up. Some of them are good. The productions, I would obviously redo all of them. But
But
I think some of the songs are actually really good. I love Radiohead. I love like Sufjan Stevens. I love the Beatles, Motown, same as you. Radiohead. I probably already said Radiohead. I don't know. It's like a big mush. Neil Young, James Taylor.
It's
like
a big
those
mush
classic
for me too.
those classic like singer songwriters. Like
Yeah,
man, like after
absolutely.
the gold rush, or like like that stuff hits home. Like, but only
Yeah.
love can break your heart. Like that kind of
Yeah,
lyric. It's so good. Like that's my
sure.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, at heart, I think I'm a pop head, generally. So, and that's pop from like, Chopin to Rachmaninoff to Cole Porter. Like
Right.
that's all pop to me. It's like melodic, stays with you. These like themes that express something universal. I think that's like, that's kind of the sweet spot where I land. There's a Sondheim quote that I always come back to as sort of like, it's like a little bit of a guiding light, whether it's production or whatever creatively, that like something and I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's something to the effect of like great art or great writing is simultaneously inevitable and surprising. So it's like, you don't want to arbitrarily throw people, for a loop and like defy expectations in the kind of like wrong way. It's like, you're always kind of doing this dance of expectations with the listener. But so I think there has to be a sense of inevitability. It's satisfying when you hit that like third chorus or whatever, and the listener knows what's coming, but if there's a way to make it fresh or do something unexpected, do something surprising in a pleasurable way, that's kind of like, that's the sweet spot, whether it's, lyrically playing with a rhyme structure or like a
clever modulation or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that's just like a real yes moment. I think, songs are just like a recording is just a series of moments. It's like the pop perspective, everything's a hook. So, you're really guiding your listener on a journey
through time,
with the energy of the song, to
energy management. We go back full circle.
It's energy management. It's like you can't start the song off on a 13 out of 10. You got to like.
I literally had to tell that to somebody this week. It's like, shouldn't the strings come in from the beginning? I'm like, no.
Yeah. It's all
right.
That's all life. I don't know. I feel like I can come back to energy and attention management. That's everything. That's my takeaway. Yeah.
Right. And attention could be, a hook. Like, when do you put in a hook, or when do you drop a line or a counter melody or whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, like, well, and also just, to like put it in a mixing framework, like what is worth paying attention? Like, what is the listener going to be paying attention to? Like, what are the, you can do all this like super nuanced, like 7 layers of keys and strings and whatever. And that's always my temptation is like, I'm just kitchen sink. I want all the layers, all the parts, all the.
You're a maximalist.
I am.
Like Jacob
I am.
Collier vibe.
I always have to like try to, rein that in a little bit because, at the end of the day, if you're adding 4 new elements every 8 bars or whatever, it's like your listener can't keep, we need the story. We need a cast of sonic characters happening.
Right.
Like, I don't want a new character coming in, like a new group of characters coming in every scene, like
totally.
Like, who are these people? I thought I was dealing with just like an 808 and a kick and a snare. And then all of a sudden there's like, 7 synths and strings and reeds just enter.
Here comes the accordion, like what?
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes that can be like a fun surprise or whatever. Like, you can use that as a mechanism, but,
right.
But,
people should be familiar.
Yeah, I think attention, that's like when I'm working on a mix, for instance, and I catch myself getting really tweaky, like soloing something and I'm whatever, then I know it's time to, freshen the perspective and just like go take a walk or whatever, like go change my perspective. Cause like, I'm sure we've all had those times when we're like, laboring over a mix for 16 straight hours and like go to bed at 3 and you're just like thinking, oh, I nailed it. And then you get up the next day and it's like, anyone's guess whether or not you nailed it. Like, you never know what you're going to pull up in a session. So
yeah, but we've been there. Yeah, totally. Time is the ultimate objectifier for me. Yeah, let's get into mixing a little bit. Let's get a little technical. I was listening to I didn't manage to get to everything you sent me because you sent me a lot of stuff. But I guess I noticed a couple things that, overall, vocal effects was one of the things I noticed. Like you seem to have like a thing with like reverbs and delays. Maybe I'm surmising this, but yeah. Any I don't know, tried and true techniques, plugins, any thought processes when it comes to affecting vocals?
Yeah, I mean, I like, I guess I would have to think about like an overarching philosophy or whatever. Like, I think it's interesting to think about like the space in which something might be played or performed or whatever, and to impart a sense of place on the vocal. So like, obviously that's what reverb or delay is for. We're adding reverb to a vocal because it's like the human ear will detect those reflections and kind of locate the sound in a space. So just to think about it almost more in a physical way. I mean, obviously you can use effects creatively, and just arbitrarily a singer is somewhere out in, like in space or whatever, or in a cave, or you can do things that defy expectations on that front too. But I think, I think just in terms of vibe, that's one of the instant ways to impart some character and distinguish an element, obviously in a mix, is by giving it its own unique space, which is to say, like, maybe the vocal has like a little, little, like it's in an isolation booth emulation or something like that. And the, we want the drums to feel like they're in a cavern, or we want, like just to kind of think through like what the relationship between the elements are from a spatial standpoint, like what, how you want them to relate, both in terms of like, okay, is this like a band in a room, or, just kind of using that tension between like, okay, well, we can make this a real physical, like as if all these people are in a room together, or like, we can kind of play with, depth and like put this element behind here and this element. It's like, you don't have to default to like realism or whatever, but just, I think there are, just fun way, like, it's a creative, it's one creative thing that you can do to distinguish a sound source like very easily.
Yeah. So you do a lot of
and,
that.
I don't know. I mean, in terms of like go-tos, I don't know if you want to get all like plug in.
Sure. A little
chatty.
bit. Not too much, but a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, once again, I'm like trying to have fewer tools these days because I've just been like on a tear the last like 10 years of, whatever the latest and greatest,
dude,
whatever
I just reinstalled all my plugins on this like Mac Studio. You don't want to know how long it took me.
Oh no, I remember when I did that on my laptop, it was like, it's a multi-day.
Yeah, it was like a better part of a week and like a couple, a few 2-hour sessions basically to like download and then install. It's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
And it was like Logic was like, okay, testing like 380 like audio unit plugins,
Oh yeah. Well, 380 is pretty respectable, I think. That's not like
that's not too crazy.
It's not. That's a good number.
It's probably closer to 400 when I do like afterwards. This is what I missed.
Yeah, right. You got the mono and the stereo versions of everything, and
right. That's true. Yeah, I guess my list isn't that insane.
But I mean, yeah, I've been going back through and just trying to like whatever, like give myself fewer options to some degree. Where I have a folder now of like decommissioned plugins, where I'm just like, it's like the Marie Kondo thing. Like, this plugin hasn't sparked joy for the last like 2-3 years. So it's going in the bin for a while. And then if I think of it, if I remember that I have that, I mean, every once in a while, it's good to like go through and just kind of remind yourself, like what tools you do have at your disposal. But yeah, like, I don't know, for reverbs, whatever, it's going to be the usual suspects, like all the, Baby Audio Crystalline is that's a nice one that I've been using recently. Obviously the Valhalla, everybody mentions the Valhalla. I had a phase with the Eventide SP 2016 for a while, because it just felt like a little more transparent, I guess. It's like a little less heavy-handed and reverby, but it was still like feeling pretty effective for, placing something in a space without being too obvious. So, yeah. And then more recently, actually, a discovery of mine in the past year, that I've been using all over the place is just the what is it, like the Sunset Studios chamber,
Yeah.
the IK multimedia.
Yeah, I've heard. I haven't used it, but I've heard great things.
And I had, I have other chambers and plates and whatever, but more often than not, when I use that, it's for the actual, like the live room emulations or the ISO booth emulations, because like you toss that just like small, 14% on the mix knob or whatever on a vocal, and it's like all of a sudden it's got this width to it and a thickness, and that's been kind of like magical for me. I really have enjoyed that on whatever vocals, drums, anything that I feel like needs to like stand out and kind of have its place a little bit more.
Yeah.
I've been using that all over the place. And obviously you can do the old like Motown, like mono kind of spring trick, like a mono verb to kind of give a little bit more front to back. And
I need to do more of that. I just got the audio thing, spring reverb thing, and it sounds really dope.
Oh, yeah. I like that one too. That's a great one.
Yeah. I'll tell you my
Echo Rec is good too.
What is? Sorry?
The Echo Rec. I don't know if I've Pulsar Echo Rec. I like that one.
I'll have to check it out. My secret sauce reverb plugin is the Waves Manny American reverb.
Oh yeah?
Have you checked that one out?
No, I don't have any of the Manny the Wave stuff.
Yeah, I think it's based on his Bricasti unit, and that thing just adds like a depth and character. Like it adds depth and character better than like I don't know almost any other reverb plugin I've used. And so just there's something about it. Don't tell me to
buy another reverb plugin.
It's like the only plugin that's keeping me on Waves,
Yeah, right. You got to whup every like 2 years or whatever.
I just whupped.
I know.
When I didn't whup for like 5 years, but it's like I got a new computer and I need some of these plugins. So like, what are you going to do about it? Here goes $240,
Oh, yeah. Right. I did that sometime in the last year, and I like just barely missed the email about, I don't remember. There was some like cutoff and I could have whupped for cheaper and blah, blah, but whatever.
This is what we do for a living. Sometimes you got to spend some money,
No, totally. I know. I just opened my go-to reverb folder here, and I'm seeing like the Sonsig is another nice one.
I'll say I wasn't off so much when I mentioned the reverb thing. It sounds like you're deep in it.
Oh no, I got like 30 of them in my go-to folder.
That's too. That's too many.
Some of these don't need to be in there.
Let's do the Marie Kondo thing.
Yeah, let's do it live on air. This can be just like a.
Gonna get rid of this
HGTV, yeah.
And somebody in the audience is like, "No, I use that every time."
Extreme bus makeover or whatever.
Extreme bus makeover. Sick.
Extreme template makeover.
Template makeover. The other thing I noticed was massive drums in your mixes. Yeah, I was into your drums. Tell me about your drums.
What's funny is I mentioned this to you. I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts the last week to just see if I was going to get any curveballs thrown at me or whatever. And I heard you in a couple of them talking about this like really natural kind of like, not super compressed like type drums. And I was just thinking to myself like, oh man, he's going to hate my drums because I just like can't have big enough, slappy enough, like punchy enough drums. I like
ever. Both, man. They both have their place.
But yeah, I mean, it's weird. I mean, it depends on the record. I just produced another artist where we definitely leaned, a little less like in your face on the drums. It was like a little less beat driven, I guess, and more organic sounding. But generally, especially whatever, if you're looking at the Gregory Brothers stuff, that's all like very pop and hip hop, like modern pop and hip hop. Like you can't get it can't like kick you in the chest hard enough. It's just like it needs to.
You need to also like freaking break through those like phone speakers and stuff,
Yeah. Actually, what I've discovered on that front, and this is going to sound like a total like noob observation, I think. I realized recently actually that one of the very first plugins I bought like years years ago when I started actually investing in like some decent plugins or whatever was a clipper, was Kazrog K-Clip. And I used it here and there, but pretty sparingly, and didn't really know what I was doing with it. And then recently I've come back to clipping drums in particular, and, whole mixes to a small degree, like half a dB, 1 dB or something, maybe, hard clipping. And yeah, I mean, in terms of just like impact, like shaving off some of those peaks, you just get all that thickness. If you're thinking about like the wave is going like this, and you just want that thing to be like loud, just shaving off a little of that transient, you're getting all the like girth of that snare and kick and whatever.
Yeah.
When you just take off a couple, maybe a couple dBs.
Yeah.
And that's actually been making a big impact, so to speak, in my my mixes.
Yeah.
Recently.
That makes a lot of sense. I've never like got like I haven't done a ton of clipping with mixing and stuff, but I should really mess around with it more. I've tried to use like the my buddy Nicholas DiLorenzo had a video of how you could use the Pro L2 like a clipper, and I messed around with like the Pro L2, like like I think it was like a super slow attack kind of thing. I don't remember. I should try it again. I should get back into clipping. I should check it out again.
I mean, there's a million ways. Like whatever. I heard on one of the other recent episodes, like talking about inflator, Oxford inflator, or a limit, any limiter. Like obviously there are a million ways you can get something loud,
right?
Or tools to use. So whatever. It's like
clipping has been your thing.
Yeah, just recently. Recently, I've kind of like gotten turned back onto it. Specifically, if we're gonna like talk plugins, I got Acoustica Ash, which came out pretty recently. But yeah, that's just it's just got a thing that it does that I really like right now. It's like it's not colored, when you're hard clipping. It's not to like make it sound whatever, like it's not imparting a color or vibe ideally, but it's just literally like cleanly
bringing things up.
I mean, I think that one also emulates like the converters and stuff. There's like more going on under the hood, but
Cool. In terms of like drum processing, are you like heavily processing the drum bus, or are you kind of going in on the individual instruments? Like what's your approach to getting those kind of bombastic, massive drums?
I think generally for me, because I've almost always been exclusively in the box, my approach has been, my preference is not like obvious compression. Like so I'm using, instead of one plugin to do, 12 dB of gain reduction, I'm using like 5 plugins that are each doing 1 dB or something like that. So I mean, whatever. I don't, not necessarily literally, but just to do things in stages. So like maybe the kick and snare, I'll do a little individual processing on, maybe a little compression and EQ, and then like my tops, just to kind of control what's going on. But then all my drums are going to usually one drum bus. Sometimes I'll have separate buses for like high drums and low drums. So like, kick, snare, toms or whatever, and then like cymbals, overheads, shaker, perk type stuff.
Interesting.
Separately. Because, often if I hit those elements with my low drums bus, they just get too
washed out,
too harsh. Yeah. Too, I just don't like what it does, from a tonal perspective.
Yeah.
So I like to hit those elements separately, and then often those are then summed into another bus that's either like all drums or sometimes all drums and bass. And that bus almost always has Acoustica gain station on it, just doing a little tiny bit, like it's that Mike Dean plug-in with them. I don't want to get too like plug-in-y, because also I think, one of my big lectures for myself for the past couple of years, like looking at the past couple of years, is like, the tools are not as important as the choices that you're making. Like,
right.
Don't get lost in the tools.
Absolutely.
Like your favorite records none of them had the latest and greatest plugin
Right.
that just came out on them. Like you can,
Yeah.
you don't go spend a bunch of money on plugins. Like
Yeah.
wait for Black Friday and then spend a
Always
bunch
wait
of
for
money
Black.
on No, just
Dude,
kidding.
Black Friday is like the hack.
It's crazy. People outside music don't understand this. It's like, where else can you get something 90% off?
Only on Black Friday.
Outside like Craigslist, yeah.
It's only on Black Friday for the audio community. People, don't buy anything unless it's Black Friday. Just wait and use whatever you have, even if it's stock plugins, unless it's the Pro Q3, in which case just buy the Pro Q3 because everyone needs that right now.
Totally. That's all you need.
Just the Pro.
Or, everyone's
Stock
talking about this
compression, but the Pro Q3.
Kirchhoff thing recently, but I haven't bitten the bullet and gotten that yet because I'm still on the Pro Q3 wave. But
okay, I see.
the Kirchhoff,
I've heard
3-body. It's the new Pro. It's the new
okay.
EQ that everyone's gaga about.
Let me hold out on that a little bit till Black Friday.
Yeah, I'm making that my I'm like putting a stake in the ground. Like that's the line that I'm drawing. Like I have too many of everything.
You shall not pass.
Yeah.
Not until Black Friday. In which case, for $30, let's go.
It's like the Wild West,
Yeah, absolutely.
on Black Friday.
Actually, I was in New York on Black Friday, and I only got the audio thing reverb. That was the only thing I bought this year. So,
Wow, congratulations.
yeah. It was also thankfully because
That's
I was
really admirable.
I was on vacation in New York, and like I just like I didn't have time to like sit down and see what did I want to wasn't happening. So that was
Same boat for me. I was
the
like
bullet.
trying to finish all those orchestrations for that concert I mentioned, which was the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So we had like rehearsals Sunday, Monday. I don't know why we did that
if
to
I had
ourselves.
known about it, I could have come. Like,
Oh man, it was amazing. But
I probably
I
couldn't have come with the baby and the 4-year-old, but maybe
Sure,
let's pretend.
but
I was in New York at the
It was
time.
not a fruitful Black Friday for me, and it was I saved a lot of money, but
Yeah.
by not having any time to even think about plugins at the time. But
Yeah, it's great. So you're living up to your your ideals now, so to speak.
yeah, now I'm back to buying like hardware.
Okay. Sick. What did you buy?
Well, so over. I don't know. We don't need to get into
Let's
like
not
gear
get
talk.
into it.
I have limited. I don't have a lot of hardware actually. Like I'm not a huge gearhead, and I'm trying to like be more specific about the tools that I have. So I'm getting stuff for specific reasons, like to have a better remote rig or a nice like pre-flavor or something for a mic, or a slightly different synth flavor or something like that. But
I got you. Sick. Well, maybe now's the perfect time to head over to the sauce segment. We can listen to what you've been working on. We haven't decided which song it is. Do you want to do your song or Jack's song?
I guess let's do mine just because it's fresh on my
Sick.
brain. That might not even be the final master that I sent you. That's like the first master that I got back. So I guess this is a risky move, but
Okay.
But
whatever's good for you.
But I was also, unless there's like a Gregory Brothers or Shmo Yoho tune, like whatever we can.
Yeah, no. Let's we'll listen to something that's like less humorous and more. I don't know. I don't want to say serious, but
wintry.
More wintry.
It's a wintry. Yeah, it's a wintry. It's by my project, which is called Snowshoes, which doesn't exist yet, but it will.
Okay, perfect. So you heard it here first. This is Carried Away by Snowshoes, aka Aaron. And so I'll listen to that for about 90 seconds and we'll chat about it. Sound cool?
Cool.
Yeah, Aaron, sounds super cool. I really like that change up in the second verse when the drums totally shift gears and bombastic drums, very vibey, spacey vocals, kind of like the stuff that we kind of talked about a little bit. Yeah, tell me a little bit about that track. What went into it?
Well, I guess I based that on a weirdly, just thinking back to the idea of, I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but just like comfort zones and one of my kind of favorite idea generating mechanisms is just to like use something that I don't feel like I'm good at or know my way around, like a tool that I'm like, oh, well, I've never tried this VST or whatever. So I think that I made that beat, the instrumental for that, in a single sitting in like 2019, the day that I got my Strat, which is hanging on the wall over there. And I'm like a serviceable guitarist. Like I would almost never even call myself a guitarist because like I can record on guitar, but I've never performed on guitar. I'm a keys guy. I'm a good pianist, good keys player. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I guess with that particular song, I just wanted to use the guitar. So I just quickly, like, there was a sample that I found on Splice, I think, that I liked, just the one that the song starts with, which kind of rides through the whole thing. And I think I literally just like grabbed the first drums that I had that I found in my library, which were this like weird vaporwave thing, which I think maybe came from a track I was working on with the Gregory Brothers at the time or something. So these weird like 80s-ish lo-fi vaporwave drums. And I just literally like put a beat down really quickly, like made the bass line or whatever, just to get to the point where I could start playing guitar. And I kind of accidentally, I didn't realize it till probably months later, made a kind of weird dub reggae type, rhythmically. I think the drum pattern, I was actually, for whatever reason, thinking of, there's a Nirvana tune where the kick doesn't hit on the downbeat. Like, is it Very Ape or Milk It or something maybe? Anyway.
Cool.
But yeah, I just wanted it to feel this like really psychedelic kind of swirly, disorienting rhythmically vibe. And so the guitars obviously like, support that just with the treatment, the effects. And, it's my own kind of like shoddy guitar playing. So, so I think that also, the imperfection of it gives it a certain vibe. I'm playing a bunch of little leads and little, dinky things like throughout. But yeah, and then I guess I wrote the chorus pretty quickly thereafter and wrote the verses with my friend Steph Tom, who's amazing. She's another production partner of mine, songwriter. She had her own project called Crown. She's just great writer and singer. And yeah, so we had like choruses and verses, but the instrumental was not in song form whatsoever. It was just like really meandering. And I really liked the arc of the instrumental because it was kind of like this, like hits you hard at the top, then sort of drops off. And then it's like a really long crescendo to everything else getting added back in. But it was kind of a tough nut to crack from the, a song structure standpoint. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we just messed with a lot of different arrangement, adding a bar or, adding that a bridgey section after the second verse. It's like the song structure is a little bit weird and it took a little while to try to find something that I thought worked. So, whether or not it does ultimately is not up to me, but yeah. But yeah, it was kind of like vibe forward, and Steph urged me to make the vocals a little more natural sounding. So I think we kind of compromised on from the production and mixing standpoint where, they're still fairly affected, like you said, and they're not, they're kind of otherworldly and bizarre, which was sort of the vibe that the song, relates to. I'm not going to like try to explain the song, but but yeah, just sort of disorienting and like feeling kind of out of your element. There's like this nautical sort of swirling kind of theme, but yeah, so it was a fun, as if nothing else, like, so the whole point of this solo project is just to be kind of a receptacle for whatever musical ideas I have laying around. So it's going to be really wide ranging. Yeah. And this just happens to be the first release. But yeah, it's kind of just like a little sandbox for me, like this project, Snowshoes.
Yeah, it's a personal project,
like, Yeah. Like what do I have sitting around, or what do I want to make? What, like, even as an exercise, like a little production etude of sorts or something, like where I'm like, well, what do I want to work on? Like, let's do something a little like warbly, whirly, swirly, psychedelic or whatever. And then actually the next song that we're working on together is very, very different. It's more like a, modern R&B type tune. So, it's kind of, for me, my, what has always kept things interesting and fresh, and I think prevented a level of burnout, because I've been fortunate to work on hundreds of tracks and a lot of different, artists' work the last 5-10 years. But the variety of that, and then just the different hats that I've worn and the different kind of like genres that I've been able to step into, is just an endless source of curiosity and inspiration, like just being curious about, like almost kind of like, when I started working for the Gregories, it was like, it was a bit of a left turn because I'd been in theater land and just kind of producing on my own and still doing some pop stuff here and there. But it was as much as anything else, like, whoa, this sounds like a lot of fun. So, let's try it. Like I didn't, I definitely felt like, I jumped in the deep end, but, I think that's also a fruitful creative practice is just like, if you're a little uncomfortable, then you're probably on the right track.
Right. Got to lean into that uncomfort. Yeah. But the track sounds great, man. And, yeah, I love those drums and the vocals with just super big. I guess you like triple track them. Like, what'd you do? Like it's,
actually I recorded, I think those are actually the demo vocals for the most part that I at least on the chorus,
the SM58,
because I re-recorded them. Yeah. With the 58, it's got that sweet, like 58 vibe happening. No, but I mean, I recorded them at home. It was probably on a 414. Yeah, probably, nothing. My approach, I don't consider myself like a vocalist, certainly not first. Like I almost never sing, so I feel like if I can get my voice to sound good, like I can get anyone's voice to sound good. And right. I think that that's been a great like asset to me, working on other people who can just like sing their asses off. Like it I feel like I can elevate it even like that much more because I've spent time trying to figure out how to make my own voice sound good,
Right.
So
probably also helps in recording sessions and, guiding.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. Like I think, I love vocal production and I love harmonies and stacked vocals and, like I'm a maximalist. So it's like 15 of those things in there. But with this one, it was kind of tricky to focus on like, okay, well, how much do we want it to just sound like a gang vocal throughout, or do we want like a lead vocal in there?
Right.
And we kind of like, it's more of a lead vocal, I guess, in the verses, but there are always two of those, and then a bed of other vocals and doubles and stuff under that. So it's like parallel harmonies kind of throughout. It's this weird like fourthy thing in the verses where, the harmonies are a little more bizarre, but and then in the chorus, it's it's more of just a typical like gang vocal stack. But yeah, I mean, I guess I think the chorus vocals were just the original demo vocals that I recorded in like 2019 or something. And I think I tried to beat those, but there was something about like,
right.
I was just a little more connected to the song then or whatever.
Right.
And
yeah,
it just felt, I don't know. I just went back to the original vocal because I was like, I don't know. I was recording through a better chain, last year when I redid them. And I don't know. It just didn't
have the magic.
It didn't hit it for me. Yeah. So
yeah,
I did layer like a weird little like vocal synth vocoder under there too. I'm just trying to think back. Like there's some other weird, delay and there's a lot of, I could definitely simplify my, production on this thing, but I tried a lot of parallel, like, phasing and tape and all kinds of parallel processing. There's like a space station. There's a lot of, stuff happening in parallel, that I'm riding up and down,
cool.
in the different sections and stuff. And then, some really wacky stuff that happens during the bridge, just like in terms of obvious kind of more dramatic effects. But, yeah, I also need to shout out. So I did all the, the whole instrumental, but, my buddy, Joshua Crumley, Steph's friend too, is a phenomenal bassist, and he actually has his own project too that he's been he's put out several albums over the course of the pandemic. But so we went up to his place in Harlem, and he just laid down a bunch of just glorious like melodic bass.
Cool. I wasn't sure if it was real or synth.
Well, yeah. So the main line I played on it's key bass.
Right.
It's like literally keyscape, I think, key bass.
Oh.
And then I layered so he doubled that, and that's kind of like the top end of that. And then I also have, I think I even also put something to support that, a more consistent sub in there too. I spent a lot of time on the bass on that, but yeah, all the bass in the verse is him, all that kind of like arpeggiated bass. And then in the outro, he just laid down. I mean, honestly, I could have just used all 10 minutes, or he just like ran through the track a couple times. And I kind of want to just go back in and make another song out of all the other stuff that he played, because it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a sucker for bass. I'm a bass player, so.
Oh yeah. No, I've heard.
So you've heard
17 episodes that I listened to this past week.
Oh shit.
Yeah, no, I actually, during that session, so I don't know if you can see that there's in the mirror.
I can
right
see
here.
something through the mirror.
Yeah, that's a Fender American Pro 2 5-string that I got because previously, I played bass in a band in college, and I had this Ibanez that was like this really like terrible broken. There's nothing wrong with Ibanez, but it was just broken, like literally snapped off on a flight, like knobs missing. It had gotten really, used and abused. So it was time for an upgrade. And Josh, I think had one from Fender that they sent him, one of these. It was like a pre-release or something. And this was also in 2019. And yeah, it just I don't think he played that on this track. I can't remember what he played, but I played it when I was there, and it was just beautiful. Like I really connected with it. So
this is my instrument.
I wound up getting that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not his particular one, but I got
right.
the same.
Yeah. Sometimes you just play a bass and it just feels right. Like I remember the first time I played like a Hofner. I don't own a Hofner. I have an Epiphone. But the first time I played a Hofner, I was like, wait a minute. This is what I've always been dreaming of, like sound wise. You're like,
yeah.
And like the feel and the size and like short scale. And like there was just like, I had like an aha moment of like, oh shit, I think maybe I'm a Hofner kind of person, And
yeah.
And then I got this Epiphone like viola bass, and it's all I play now. It's like a cheap bass. It was like a $400 bass or something. Put some flats on it. Done.
Shoot. I need to talk to you about, whatever. I don't need another bass, but
right. Yeah.
But no, it's 100% true. The instrument, whatever. like the piano that I grew up playing is like my favorite piano to play, and it's not a great piano. Right. It's fine. Right. It's like, there's definitely finding something you connect with and can kind of like,
yeah.
I feel like it's, whatever you're doing as a music maker is ultimately just it's translation. It's just like getting your interior world outside, kind of. It's like emotional translation. Music is just like a pure form of expression. So it's like finding a tool like that, whatever. It doesn't have to be like like a $200,000 Bosendorfer or whatever. It's like finding something that for whatever reason you have that emotional connection with. Yeah. And I think that's when people go back to like analog versus digital. I think often that's what feels like it's missing in the digital realm, is like just that emotional, I don't know if it's a physical thing or what, but like some sort of emotional connection or attachment, or like feeling that I can communicate what I'm trying to communicate in this realm inside this screen, like I think I've been trying to kind of reconnect with, piano, and I for years, like I grew up playing piano, classical and whatever, like was very much just like a piano guy. And then I've gotten away from that, and was making exclusively like computer music, just all in the box, for years now. So I've just in the last few months kind of tried to get back and, just get back to basics and reconnect with like
the source.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like you can always, as a producer, you can always vibe up a bad idea. It's like putting lipstick on a pig or whatever. You can really lean heavily on sound design and production, but it doesn't make the idea valuable necessarily. It doesn't make the idea more meaningful or better. So it's like, I think, does it work? Does it work if you just do it on the piano? Like, can you make a song work back to basics? Like, I think that's an important, another lesson for myself.
Yeah. Back to basics. We're going back to basics.
we got like energy management, attention management.
Right. I don't know. I had like a random thought, but I'll tell you after the podcast about the lipstick thing. Yeah. But anyways, where am I going from here? That's great. I'd lost my train of thought. I had an idea and it wasn't relevant, and now I lost my place. What was the last thing you said? I'm making a little edit here. I'm so sorry. I'm just getting late.
Oh,
my brain.
Just back to basics, like how I was just kind of trying to reconnect with like something physical, like a physical, a piano, something that's like, hammers hitting the strings and creating vibrations. Like
no, totally. Yeah, that I totally connect with that first guitar, that first piano thing. Absolutely. There's definitely like that what was it? The Baldwin in my parents' house, like that, there's something about that piano, right? Like, I spent hours in front of that thing. And so it had the reps to like be my conduit,
Mm-hmm,
and so and therefore, like when you sit down on that piano, immediately things will start coming. And probably the reason why I like that Hofner sound is because I listened to so many Beatles records and I love the sound of Paul's bass, so it's like, it all goes back to whatever that memory is. And
it's like finding a best friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
there, you've been here the whole time. Amazing. So I guess that brings us towards the end of the episode. I don't know if we answered that question, like the creative energy question at the beginning, but should I ask it again? I don't know.
Yeah. So like what kind of like, if you're not feeling inspired or not feeling like sitting down, I think, not to keep harping on it, but just like the energy and inertia thing, like just being aware of what your internal state is. And like, if I've got that, like sit on the couch and scroll and like do something aimless on YouTube for 4 hours energy to me, then like, maybe it's time to take a cold shower or go for a run or whatever, like to just do something proactive, like action, begets action. It's like, it's just momentum. So to take any kind of action, like do the dishes or whatever, like do something. And then often I feel like, things can kind of snowball from there. But also just being aware of also like we said, that you're not gonna, I think there's some value in just like swinging the bat every day and getting the reps in.
Right.
But, not every day is going to be the day for you to, write that, the lyric of the song you've been avoiding or whatever. Like you could try something, make a draft or whatever. But, sometimes the most productive thing you can do is take a nap or like to do something completely different, like just don't, I think, just being aware of like where your head is at and that your most valuable tool, piece of hardware, as a creator is like your brain. So just if you're not tending to that, like it's just going to make everything more difficult. You might think that a great idea is terrible, if you're in the wrong frame of mind or whatever. So just, I guess doing something that kind of like shakes the snow globe and alters your perspective a little bit, I think can be really helpful. And just whether that's literally physically going out for a run or, listening to a, like weirdly, I got turned on to the Stooges recently. I'm sure I've listened to some Stooges, but I think I was like listening to a podcast with Iggy Pop and I like went back and started rediscovering like MC5 and Stooges. And I'm like, that alters, it's like, it's a whole different way of thinking about music making, like there's an ethos implied in that's like foreign to me, like that I love. And so I think that, encountering things like that, like giving yourself, different viewpoints and perspectives, like those things can be really inspiring and like make you want to sit down and try something. Just try,
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Got to get out of your, we all have like our own like little, habitual things that we tend to go back towards, and sometimes it's good to like break that cycle, because we
Yeah.
otherwise
There's
we can kind of rinse and repeat ourselves.
Well, totally. I think that's the beauty of the perspective of like the gardening versus architecture thing, where, anything can be, any rule, any limitation can be like a creative tool, like a generative creative tool. So like, there are a million things that I don't know how to do well. And those are all opportunities for me to like misuse something, to like do something, to like play the guitar badly, but in a useful, interesting way.
Very cool.
Doing something that you're unfamiliar with, that you're uncomfortable with or whatever. Like, I think that's almost always like a fruitful approach to making something.
Like if you've heard any of the interviews with Phineas, like Billie Eilish's brother, like he says like, oh yeah, I was just trying to do this and I failed at it and I kind of gave up halfway and did it my way and this is what came out and that was the cool thing on the record, So,
totally.
And like I literally I had the conversation with somebody named Cameron Lister recently, one of the more recent episodes, and he was saying like how do we find our own voice is like by failing to become other people. So, but you have to try, I guess, and then learn how you're like failing.
The Oedipal thing where you're just trying to like emulate your heroes or whatever, and then ultimately like, you find your own path.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well, speaking of your path, that leads me to the final question of the show, which you obviously know is coming. But yeah, looking back on your journey, was there something you did or didn't do that you'd want to impart on the listeners, maybe more at the beginning of their journey? I mean, not necessarily. But, of like, hey, Aaron, keep at that. It's going to get you where you want to go. Or maybe, don't do that. It's holding you back. What would be that one piece of advice?
I think, I thought about this a little bit. I thought of a few things actually, but one of the major headings I would say was just like being curious, and when I started out making music, I don't know. I think I was more critical and just like a little more aware of like, oh, well, this is my lane and I don't do that, or I'm not interested in this thing or whatever. And I think over time, I gradually, have adopted more of a mindset of just like curiosity and like, just openness to whatever's happening. I think one thing that, that helps as a producer, that helps you become a good producer, is just the ability to fall in love with whatever's happening in the room, whatever the ideas are, like to see those as like, oh, well, this could be, see what it could be like. And it's almost like improv, like the whole yes and thing, where it's like, you don't really know if something's going to work or not until you try it. So like, I think I heard a story about a really well-known producer and artist who, it's like the person delivering their food on Seamless could have an idea and they would try it out because it's like, yeah, that could be cool. Like, so just, I guess having an attitude of curiosity and creative openness, I think almost always, will serve you well, because ultimately we're working in a field where, you just never know what the outcome is going to be. You can never see the end from the beginning, when you're on a creative path. So it's just like staying open to exploration and discovery. And, that happenstance can be generous. That's like one of my favorite little quotes.
Happenstance
that like
can be generous.
Happenstance is generous. Like that if you're just open to seeing what happens, you can't necessarily, top down engineer a hit or a great record or certainly something that
aren't the AI algorithms trying to do that?
They're trying.
Right.
I think that's like the final frontier. Humor and art, I think, will be
those will be the hardest things to replicate. If that happens, we're doomed.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that's the biggest thing that I wish, early on, like in my days in LA, for instance, I would have been more open to exploring things that were different, very different creative perspectives from mine, because like it turns out, as I've been able to wear all these different hats, and like certainly with the Gregory's, like one day, there's like an orchestral mix, and the next day you're making a trap beat, and then there's like a choral thing, and it's like polka, like you name it, like any genre. And it turns out all those things are fun, like there's no reason to close yourself off and limit yourself. And I think,
right.
It's a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah.
And the more things you're open to doing and the more hats you're open to wearing, it's like, I think that only can, that will only serve your longevity and also keep you from burning out, because it's like, there's always something new to learn. It's truly like a life pursuit. So there's always, another hat to wear, a new, tool that you've never used. So just staying open and staying curious, I think.
That's cool. Yeah. I feel like, I've definitely gotten into ruts of like, I just feel like I'm doing the same thing I've always done, and that's never a fun place to be. And then you kind of need to, go back to the gardening technique and kind of let other things guide you into new places. And like, you've been harping on this the whole time. So yeah, totally resonate with that. And I guess that's a great takeaway for the episode, is just to like be open and let the journey of creativity kind of guide you, and just don't try to like control it. Sometimes you got to just roll with it, kind of thing.
Totally. I mean, that's been my approach so far, whether or not it's the right one, it is one. So
and it's working. It's working just great for you. So
it's been a fun one. It's definitely been a fun one. No complaints.
Amazing. Well,
very, very fortunate.
Awesome. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Love your work, and just keep it up. It's awesome. And
thanks so much, Ben. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the podcast. So thank you for everything that you're doing with the podcast as well.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming on.
I've learned a lot the last week.
Great. That's I was just joking about this with Matt Boudreau, who hosts Working Class Audio on his episode that I just put out. Of like, we have our own mix with the masters. We get to talk with everybody and ask
for
our
real
questions. And I think I had like that aha moment when I interviewed Vance Powell, who Matt kindly introduced me to. This is a long time ago. It was like my first like really big, or one of my first really big ones. And I was just like, I get to ask Vance Powell, who like works with Jack White, like anything I want. That's crazy. I'm like taking up 2 hours of his time, and I'm just like some Joe Schmo,
Yeah.
And
I mean, but I feel like everyone's just some Joe Schmo,
Yeah. That's true.
To some degree.
Yeah, and that's something
like
I've learned about the
people.
industry, is like everybody who does what we do is really almost always down to earth and chill, and just trying to help make great records. And it's not really about the I don't know. I was talking with a client of mine today about like fame, and it's like, I'm not really interested in fame. Like, sure, I would like recognition, but I don't, I'm not interested in fame. Like, I love being
arbitrarily.
What? Sorry?
Like arbitrarily. Like, I just want to be famous kind of thing.
Yeah. It was like, everyone wants to be famous. I'm like, I don't want to be famous. Sure, recognition would be nice, but like, I just want to help other people, with their art. So like, yeah. I don't know where I lost my train of thought here because it's just getting late here, but but the point is like, all like audio engineers are totally music producers, overall lifetime learners, chill, and are not like, high on their own asses, sort of thing.
I think it would be hard to be ultimately we're trying to execute the vision of an artist who has to own the song. So it's like, that's not, I'm not on the hook to get up and sing this. Like, I got to do something. My job every time is just to do what they love. Like, I need to deliver something that they love,
Right.
So I think that perspective, and, a big part of the job is just like being a good hang. So I think that it kind of weeds out like the people who might be,
that's
whatever,
how you weed out the
super
dicks.
Egocentric totally. Yeah.
That's Andrew Sheps famously said on Working Class Audio. The number one secret to being a successful audio engineer is not to be a dick.
Don't be a dick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Take it from Andrew Sheps, I guess,
Right.
He would know.
He's got a few records under his belt.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And have a great one. And we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thanks. Yep, you too, Ben. Thanks so much.